Okay, what I wanted to talk about was corporal punishment. And what I mean by corporal punishment is probably just the general sense of the term. And that is, corporal punishment is the most widespread form of violence against children. It is any punishment in which physical force, and we know government is not eloquence, it's not reason, it's force. And like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master, but it's physical force used and intended to cause some degree of pain or comfort. And the reason I wanted to do this video right here is because I wanted to see what you guys thought about corporal punishment. There's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. Some people go, no, not under no circumstances should you ever initiate corporal punishment against kids. And there are people on the other side of the fence that come from, a time where, hey, if you got in trouble in school, in Tennessee school, they call it, okay, you're going to get 3 licks. And licks is you get hit in the rear end with a paddle. And they didn't have you take your pants down, but they did have you bend over and touch your ankles, which, basically your butt bone is exposed. And man, they lay into you. And it's not like sometimes you would get hit by the females and it wouldn't hurt so bad. But man, if the dude, and he's 240 pounds, 6'2" dude, he's going to lay into you. And the ones that I got struck with had these aerodynamic holes in them. So like basically, when you got home and you looked at what kind of scar that left, there's these little, like it looks like polka dots on your rear end. So some people are for corporal punishment in schools. Some people are against it. I wanted to show you this reaction by the young turds, the young Turks, namely Anna Kasparian, and I can't remember who the other guy is, not the Cenk Uygur guy, but somebody else. But they respond to this Sheriff Mises from the Brevard County Sheriff's Department and what he says about bringing back corporal punishment. It's kind of funny what the guy says and how he says it. Listen to this.
We got to get to these kids before they get to me here at this jail. And so starting right now, it's a brand new day, folks. It is a brand new day where school discipline is going to be put back in place in Brevard Public Schools. And if you're a little snot that's coming to our classes to be disruptive, you might want to find someplace else to go to school, because we're going to be your worst nightmare starting right now.
Okay, so he's talking about little snots, in other words, undisciplined children, saying if you think you're going to come into the Brevard County school system and continue being little snots, you better think again, because we are going to be your worst nightmare. In other words, he's issuing a threat to little kids who are undisciplined, which is kind of interesting because we're going to see a little later about what he's talking about, these teachers attending some seminar on bullying. I would say that would be verbal bullying. So here's the reaction from the young turds.
A sheriff in Florida is just, longing for the good old days of corporal punishment in schools. That's what you just heard. He says that kids these days are misbehaving, they're acting up, they're distracting others, and because they're not sufficiently punished, they behave this way. So he plans to do something about it.
And there is a barrier that's formed between bad behavior and good behavior when you let the public know, when you let kids know or whoever know that there is going to be some swift, painful punishment that happens if you decide to cross that line. What is it? There's like Ecclesiastes 8:11. I think it says something like, when justice against an evil work is not executed quickly, therefore the hearts of the sons of men are fully set in them to do evil. In other words, if the consequence for the evil behavior, the bad behavior, doesn't happen quickly, if justice isn't expeditiously meted out, then the people who are committing that bad behavior, whether criminal activity or just behavior that a parent didn't want or whatever, and it's not thrown down quickly, then all bets are off. They're going to do whatever they want to, whenever they want to, however they want to, because obviously there's not going to be any penalty. There's not going to be any punishment. There's not going to be any pain. So I'll do whatever I want. So there is that aspect, that there's a true aspect to the elimination of swift, painful, uncomfortable punishment, which does serve as a barrier to bad behavior. Because if you didn't have that reality, if life didn't hand you some pretty quick consequences for your bad behavior, what do people end up doing? they commit more bad behavior. Like what's happening, just as one example, in San Francisco. They made it non-prosecutable, let's put it that way, for thieves to walk into a store if they stole under $950 worth of items, then they're not going to be prosecuted. Well, what did that fling the door open to? A whole bunch of thieves going, I'll just make sure that I don't steal $951 worth of stuff. And they don't even do that. They'll just steal whatever they want to, whenever they want to the point where big box stores like Target and other big box stores are leaving the area because they're tired of their stores getting looted. That's just one example of, hey, if you let people know there's not going to be any punishment for your criminal activity, they just run the gamut on you. There's like bulls in china shops. They're going to do whatever they want to, whenever they want to, steal whatever they want to.
Sheriff Wayne Ivey of Brevard County promised that with the help of the school district's newly elected conservative leadership, which ran on the promise to end so-called woke policies in schools, these students will no longer go unpunished.
Well, I mean, okay. First of all, what is public school? Public school is the outgrowth of an extortion racket. There's no way you can have the public education system, which is a complete failure. It's a complete expensive failure, but you can't have the public school system. I call it the public fool system. I call it the 15,000 hour indoctrination program, government indoctrination program. That couldn't exist unless you had extortion of the American tax cattle. So all that funding comes from parents, even if your kids aren't in school. We homeschooled all 5 of our kids. They're all graduated. They're all, smart, and they are socially adjusted. But even parents who have kids that are homeschooled that aren't put in public school get taxed. They get extorted, and those funds go to a public fool system that creates a whole bunch of indoctrinated kids. So from the get-go, you have an extortion racket in the public schools, some would say. And the bottom line is, it's not the government's responsibility to take care of your kids. It's not the government's responsibility to educate your kids. It's not the government's responsibility to discipline your kids. The government is a criminal death cult. Do you want a criminal death cult educating and punishing your kids and teaching them to do the right thing? So from the get-go, any parent who's got their child in the 15,000 hour government indoctrination program, they basically abdicated their own parental authority. Now, the question is, do these parents who want their kids in public school also want their kids punished and have pain added to the bottoms of their kids if they step out of line? It should be the parent's choice. But didn't the parent also already make the choice by having the kid go to a government indoctrination camp? I don't know, food for thought.
In fact, during this press conference in front of a county jail, he used the example of some kids refusing to quiet down and put their phones away during a school assembly that he attended, and signaled his support for, physical punishment. Let's watch.
Not long ago, we had an assembly that was taking place, an anti-bullying assembly that was taking place at Bayside.
Keep in mind, the context is an anti-bullying assembly. And he just told all the snot-nosed kids, or all the snotty kids, that he and the Brevard County school system is going to be those kids' worst nightmare, which sounds like verbal bullying, which is hilarious.
At high school, and I witnessed 2 of our teachers do everything they could to quiet down 3 kids. I'm talking about multiple times they approached these kids and told them to hold it down, to stop having their phones out in the middle of assembly. Not once did these kids care what those teachers had to say. They weren't threatened with any type of discipline or anything else, because, quite frankly, they're not worried about getting in trouble. They know nothing's going to happen to them. They know they're not going to be given after-school detention. They're not going to be suspended. They're not going to be expelled. Or like in the old day, they're not going to have the cheeks of their ass torn off for not doing right in class.
Look at her eyes. I will tell you, I've had the cheeks of my rear end torn off a time or two, and you'll learn real quick, okay, I don't want that to happen to me anymore. I better straighten up and fly right. Anna Kasparian, this ain't going to sit well with her.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, this sheriff really.
And again, I'm not for what the sheriff said, and I don't even want to convey whether I'm for or against it. I'm just telling you my experience in my day when I grew up. It was in the in the 70s and 80s, and in the 80s I graduated from high school in 1986. But all the guys that hunted came to school with their trucks with a gun rack in the back, and that gun rack had a firearm in the gun rack loaded. Were there school shootings? I don't remember many or any, none in my neck of the woods. Was there corporal punishment? Oh, you bet there was. Were students getting away with doing whatever they wanted to do? Oh, you bet they weren't. So it seemed like in some sense, I can see how somebody would look at the way schools were back in the 70s, 80s, even the early 90s, and how they are today. And people were, it seemed like students were getting along with each other better. There were no school shootings. You didn't, you saw fights, people, there's going to be fights, but nobody pulled out knives, not in Tennessee and Indiana where I grew up. Nobody pulled out a firearm and said, well, I'm going to settle this dispute once and for all. You brought your fist. Well, I'm going to go to my truck and I'm going to go get my deer hunting rifle. Never heard of any of that kind of stuff. When my mom and dad were growing up, they could put their BB guns or their pellet rifles or whatever in the back of the class when they hung up their galoshes in the wintertime. It's like, so many things have changed, and so many things that they've removed from school that they said, this is for the safety of kids. That wasn't even the issue. The issue is what's in the kid's heart. What are those barriers you're putting in front of the kids to show them that, hey, this behavior that you're trying to commit in society ain't exactly accepted, Junior? So I understand both sides of it. And I also understand the irony of an agent of government, that is the sheriff in Florida, talking about initiating violence on kids who won't behave themselves. Well, that's what police forces do. They're not serving and protecting. They're harassing and collecting from the rest of us. If we committed the same actions that government officials, namely, sheriffs and police departments do, we would rightly be viewed by society as criminals. You can't just pull somebody over and steal $250 from them because they were safely driving 7 miles an hour over the speed limit. Guys, that's extortion. A man with a gun just pulled you over under threat of arrest. And of course you had to pull over because if you didn't, they would, unleash the dogs and put the birds in the air and track you down to the ends of the earth because you went 6 miles an hour over the speed limit. And they start harassing you, and then they start collecting from you, and they start making you insecure in your person's houses, papers, and effects against what the Fourth Amendment says. But if you committed that same action that the cops do on other people, you would be seen as somebody who's harassing, who's criminally intimidating, and who's basically coming with the implied threat of force.
Prides himself as being the most politically incorrect sheriff in the country. So part of it is, trying to live up to his personal branding, which is pretty gross. But I'm really curious what the parents think.
And right? What's so funny is she'll mock Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks will mock the Brevard County sheriff for saying what he said when she calls for ending gun violence and initiating gun safety legislation and gun control laws. She's basically saying, I want the government, I want this sheriff to commit violence against you if you happen to own a firearm that madman just used to kill a whole bunch of people in that post office or government building or school. She actually calls for violence as she's trying to wax all virtuous and virtue signal to everybody that she's against violence. Well, no, you're not against violence because you want political violence, which becomes actual violence when the law enforcers do it against us. When she wants a gun control law, which is what? It's a people control law. It's a euphemism. It's not gun control. They're not trying to control inanimate objects. They're trying to control you, and they're trying to control you against your will without your consent, at the hands of a government functionary who's armed with a firearm that they don't want you to have. So she calls for violence while she condemns the violence that this cop is calling for in the form of corporal punishment in public schools. Interesting. Just interesting psychology here.
Right. So it's one thing to hear tough on kids, I'm politically incorrect sheriffs say these things, but I would like to hear from the parents and what they think about teachers, educators. And by the way, I want to hear from the teachers too. Do they want to put their hands on kids?
What if half of them do and half of them don't? What are you going to say, Anna? What if half of the parents do? Hey, swat little John. If he's stepping on a line, I don't mind. But half the parents are like, don't you touch my kid. What if it's half and half? What are you going to say? Which one are you going to go with? Why not just do what's right? Why not be consistent in everything that you say and do? Why don't we start with the illegitimacy of public schools in the first place? Illegitimate because the only reason they exist is through violence and extortion.
I know I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that as an educator.
That's another thing too, guys. There's another layer of it. If you're for public schools, you're literally for government violence and extortion, because the only reason public schools can exist, they wouldn't exist in the free market because it's an utter failure. Free market entrepreneurs know that if something fails, you do something different. You don't keep doing the same thing over and over and over expecting a different result. That is literal insanity. So the very fact that there's a public school in the first place shows you that you're okay with violence. You're okay with that violence. Well, I'm not going to pay my tax. Well, Anna Kasparian's go, well, you are paying your taxes. And if you choose not to, we're going to send men with guns to your door because you have to fund that public school. It's crazy. The hypocrisy is crazy. Wouldn't you love to go on a radio show with these people and say, hey, let's uncover some hypocrisy and inconsistency here?
And if look, I told you, Ben, recently, there are a lot of different reasons why I don't have kids. But one of the main reasons is I love so deeply, and I'm so obsessed with like protecting people around me. Like, I don't know how I wouldn't get violent in trying to protect my kids. And
I'm so obsessed with protecting people around me. That's why I want people like Beta Male O'Rourke to issue gun control laws that force you out of your long weapons. AR-15, AK-47. Hell yeah, we're going to take your AR-15, AK-47. How are you going to do it, Beta Male O'Rourke? How do you want it to be done, Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks? Oh, that's right. You want to initiate government-funded violence against peaceful people who haven't done anything wrong because some madman happened to use a gun that peaceful person owns.
If I heard that someone put their hands on my kids, I don't know if there'd be anything that could stop me from causing harm, bodily harm, to the individual who put his or her hands on my child.
That's natural. But if you don't want your child to be harmed, then automatically, because you're a thinking person, you have common sense, you don't want them to be harmed mentally or physically, then you wouldn't put them in public school, because they're going to be harmed mentally and probably harmed physically, because now they're sitting ducks in a gun-free criminal empowerment fish in a barrel zone. There's no more dangerous person you can be a place you can be on American soil than in a public school or in a federal building or a state building or a post office. That is, if you're a law abider in a post office, then you've disarmed yourselves for the criminal's convenience. If you're a law-abiding school student, then you've disarmed yourself against the Second Amendment right to be secure. To keep and bear arms for the criminal's convenience. And any teacher that does not want to be armed and sits there and goes, I'm not here to protect the kids, I'm here to educate the kids. Well, guess what? There's a gunman walking down the hallway right now. What do you want? Do you want a cell phone so you can call 911? Or do you want a Kimber 1911? Or a Glock 2240 cal? No, I'd rather have a phone so I can call 911, because when the seconds of my life are ticking away, police are minutes away. No, come on. If you're a sane, rational person, you want to be armed. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. This is just complete zoo. It's an insanity.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to add that to the list of reasons why I'm not having kids also. As many reasons I can have to justify it to anybody I'm dating. I think that's helpful.
This is the guy who's calling for the silencing the other day of Kanye West. And what is censorship? It's forcing somebody against their will into silence because you think what they say is crazy, it's hurtful, it's insanity. If you want to force somebody into silence, then you're for violence. We should make a song. If you want to force somebody into silence, you're for violence. I don't know how you would sing that, but maybe it'd be a good rap. I don't know. So these people right here who are saying they're against corporal punishment, i.e. violence against your kids, causing pain or discomfort to your kids in school, are the same ones who say, I want you to be forced into silence and I want your guns to be forced away from you at the barrel of a government gun.
But this sheriff's definitely trying just to be a badass for badassery's sake. I don't remember there was ever a time when children had their ass cheeks torn off. I don't think that's even a procedure you could do pre-Kardashian. And now,
obviously, it's a figure of speech. But man, I'll tell you, your butt it gets hot to the touch, man. If you've ever been paddled, put a 1 in the room if you've been paddled in school. And if this goes up on YouTube or whatever, put a 1 in the comment section or describe your experience or whatever. Have you ever been paddled in school? It is not a fun feeling being called out. Hey, go to the principal's office. It's like a surreal experience. Everything slows down. You're walking in the long hallway. You're going up the stairs to the principal's office or wherever it is. And you're just biting your nails going, oh my God, I just hope he shows some kind of, please, principal, don't do it. I won't ever pull Sally's hair ever again. I won't ever interrupt in class, please. Oh my goodness.
you can have it done in the post-Kardashian era, but it does require a team of medical professionals. You can't just have a sheriff or a teacher do it. The teachers in this county have said that they do agree there's a behavior problem in this county, and I do think that there needs.
And what is that attributed to? Whose responsibility is it to correct the behavior of the children? Parents. And I understand there's probably some kids out there who don't have parents. Maybe they're in a foster home, which would suck. Maybe they're in the custody of CPS, which would suck. And I think that's kind of the same thing. Maybe they're homeless. Maybe they don't have parents. Maybe they're orphans in an orphanage. It's horrible. But the parents who have children, it's your responsibility to discipline your kids. It's your responsibility. And I'm not talking about, and by discipline, I'm not just talking about, swatting or whatever. There's this verse in the Bible that says, train up a child in the way he should go. And when he is older, he will not depart from it. From what? In the way. What way? The right way. Doing what is right at all times. So, people, it's never wrong to do the right thing. And it's never right to do the wrong thing. Instill that on your kids and then show them by example how you're supposed to live this out. Tell them what you expect of them. Draw that line. Tell them what the punishment's going to be if they go beyond that line. The only legitimate authority that I can think of on terra firma is a parent-child relationship. It is the parent's responsibility and obligation to take control of that child. Nobody else cares about your child more than you do. You are in 100% control. When that baby is born, that baby is 100% dependent on you. If you leave that child, let's say it's a climate control room of 71, 72 degrees. They're not cold, they're not hot, but they're not fed. They're not, they're not given water or anything like that. They're going to die. They're 100% dependent on you. They're dependent on you for electricity. They're dependent on you for food. They're dependent on you for water. They're dependent on you for clothing. And they're dependent on you for love and encouragement and physical and mental nourishment. 100%. That parent is in control and in authority over that kid. There is no other legitimate authority that I can think of. And the reason the parent does it is because they love, not just because they want to control against their will. It's because they want to nurture them and they want to bring them up and they want to see that infant become a child and that child become an adult male or female who contributes positively to society and wouldn't think of executing or initiating unjust force and violence on peaceful people who haven't done anything wrong, who wouldn't think of stealing, who wouldn't think of initiating threats of violence on people, but who would think about looking after others as they would want to be looked after, not doing to others what they wouldn't want done to them. That's how you train up a child. It's not just, are there those disciplinary moments? Are there those corrective moments? Is pain a good teacher for kids? Absolutely. Pain's a good teacher for you and me. How many times have you just gone and just haphazardly stuck your hand over a burning stove? You haven't, because it happened once. Or you heard about it happening to somebody else once, and that's all you needed because your reasoning took over and you're like, I don't want a burnt hand. How many times have you stuck your finger in a light socket? It only takes one time, or hearing about somebody else doing it for the rational person to go, I'm not going to do that because I don't want 110 to draw me in and electrocute me right there on the spot. So pain is a great teacher. Matter of fact, if you make the mistake of going into that painful situation, guess what? The best teacher you will ever have on planet Earth was your last mistake. Just learn from your last mistake and don't do it again. It's the same thing with kids. Kids are like wet cement. You only have a certain amount of time to form them, because once they get it past a certain point, and I'm not talking about a certain age, this has to do with mentality and there's a whole lot of other factors, but there is a point at which you're not going to be able to contribute to their life and shape their character anymore. That cement is going to harden, and whatever impression you put in there, it's there. Does that mean that it's impossible for them to change in the future as an adult? No, not at all. Because there's a lot of people, that were just hellions as kids, and they were in and out of jail, and they did bad to their neighbors, and they were stealing cars, and they were into drugs and all that kind of stuff. That completely changed around. But that's the exception, not the rule. Typically, people who live like that, they get locked in. And that's why it's so important to bring up your children in a loving, compassionate, understanding, but firm atmosphere. So where you don't want to give your kids everything. You want your kids to encounter resistance, because resistance is how you grow. You want them to encounter pain, because pain is how you learn. And then that resistance, which yields growth, and that pain which yields, knowledge and experience, forms this adult who is light years beyond what that infant and that child was. So is there a place for corporal punishment? Well, I'll leave you to decide that. Is there, spare the rod, spoil the child? Is that a truism? What have you experienced? There are some people that grow up who are beaten, literally beaten by their parents. Dad comes home, takes off his belt. It doesn't matter if you get hit with the leather part or the buckle part. He's just going wild. Kids jumping around the room. That sounds pretty undisciplined on the parent and the child's part to me. But can you lovingly discipline? Can you lovingly apply a little bit of pressure, uncomfortableness, pain for a learning experience? I'll leave that to you to decide. I don't know. Leave your thought. I'm not going to play the rest of this. I just wanted to show you that there's some gross hypocrisy coming out of the sheriff's office. Like Washington said, the government is not eloquence. It's not reason. It is force. And like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master. And I wrote there was a quote that kind of resonated with me. Anytime I see something that resonates with me, I try to post it. Says violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. It's like, that's the only violence is the only tool I have in my tool shed. Every problem looks to me like a nail, so I'm just going to hammer that thing. But wisdom tells you, well, wait a second. The discipline I apply here is probably not the discipline I would apply there. It would probably be a different form of discipline, withholding of something, or maybe the application of pain for something. But it would always be done in a self-controlled, loving way, because I know as a parent, my child is wet cement. And my child looks more at my actions than listening to my words. So the actions that the words that you're telling your kids better line up with the actions that you live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I don't know. Leave your thoughts about this for the world and the global thought police about the Young Turks. What's your experience with corporal punishment? Do you think it's good in public schools or bad? Do you think public schools should be done away with? Or is it an extortion racket, which is unfair to the American people, especially if they don't have children that are going to public schools? Do you think Anna Kasparian and this guy from the Young Turks were correct in their assessment? Do you think they were virtue signaling? Let me know in your thoughts, the comment section below. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know, and don't forget to subscribe to my private email list through my website, highimpactflix.com. And don't forget to check out that video that I have right here where I shot it in 360 so you can actually interact with this video. It's a personal interactive 360 video on my Here's the Deal channel. You can look up at the sky, down at the ground. You can look all around, even action that's not in the front-facing camera. So you have total control on that. And I will leave that in the description for you as well. I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video.